It's finally time to do a tier list for the emblem skills that you can unlock. So this is for base game, no DLC. I am factoring in the well, so it's going to drastically change the tiering. I did have to create this. The ones that exist online just have excess skills or they don't have everything I want. I'm going to do a separate one for DLC where I'm going to evaluate DLC on its own. A lot of these are still good in DLC. Let's start with Advance. So this is a Roy skill. This is, in my opinion, bad and situational. So all it does is it allows you to move forward an extra tile to melee attack someone, and it only works on melee abilities. So if you want to hit something that's 3 range away with a 2 range and it moves you, it doesn't do that. It also... Let's see how much it costs. I have it open on the side here. So 500 SP. That's not the worst thing. Now, there's way better passives, and there's really no reason to run this. It can increase momentum damage, which is kind of neat, but it's really all it does. It's really just something you would use when you have Roy equipped already, so that it gives you extra attack range. But outside of that, I don't think it's very useful. Next, we have Alacrity. Now, as a passive that you get for free on Lin, I would say it's good. As something you unlock, I would say it's okay. I don't find this to be super useful. There's way better high impact passives. The only thing this really does is it allows a unit who is already very fast to hit the enemy twice before the enemy hits them back. Now in this case, you're gonna have to spend SP. It takes a passive slot. Alacrity plus costs 3k SP. That's not worth it in my opinion. That's so situational. There's you're better off with Speed Taker, with Strength, with even Momentum, like Sword Power, Lance Power, Axe Power. There's so many better options that I don't see this as being a relevant thing. Next we have Arms Shield, which is a Leaf passive. Now, using this on Leaf makes sense because he gives you Adaptable, which is something you can't unlock, which changes your weapon to counter the enemy's weapon in terms of effectiveness and range. So on Leaf, it makes sense, but Arm Shield plus, you get -7 damage as long as you have weapon advantage, and it is cheap. It's only 600 SP, but getting a weapon advantage is not something you can consistently account for. So getting like a situational damage reduction, it's okay. It's definitely not bad because it at least has a use case and it does something, but in my opinion, this is like bad gentility, which we'll get into in a second. All right, the next one is on Beleth. I'm just scrolling down to it because I have the list open here as a reference. It is Arts Focus. So the max is up to +30 hit at the cost of dodge, -10 when using an art. Arts aren't very inaccurate, and most art users tend to have decent hit rates. So I would say this is like situational. So I have bad and situational as one tier. So like if something's bad, I'll say it's bad. If something's situational. So this could be situational if you want to run a unit for whatever reason that you want to punch things and they have bad decks. Maybe you could use this, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be that useful. Avoid +30, I would say, is metagame. The Avoid Plus, it can be kind of expensive. The availability is kind of suspect, but it's mostly like endgame or very early. If you can get like Avoid +10 to 20 on certain units early, this can actually be huge. But this is arguably one of the best skills in the game. Avoid tanking is a thing. You can solo the game with Avoid tanking. It can break the game. There are tons of different builds that can leverage this, and it's universally good. Even if you're just using it to reduce average damage your team tanks on certain units, it's very powerful. Axe Power. So Axe Power costs 5k total to get up to tier 5. It has great availability. I would say this is metagame. Any unit that can double on axes will benefit from this. Any unit who wants to run like Brave Axe build can benefit from this. This enables, high damage axes regardless of the unit. So you can have a unit that has poor damage output that has good speed or good build or both and get them doubling consistently. Or you can even just run this with Lunar Brace with Brave Axe and just consistently one round everything you player phase attack. But this also works on enemy phase, so this is good on any unit that uses axes. It could throw it on a Tomahawk unit and just have the enemy phase throw Tomahawks at dudes, even if they don't double, it'll still just give you +10 damage. It's pretty crazy. All right, next we have bow agility. This is on Lucina. Grants avoid plus 30 at the cost of crit minus 10 when using a bow. Now this could be good. I would put this in good. I could see this being useful on coverts, like archers that are on avoid tiles, so it just gives them extra avoid, as well as increasing average avoid. I could see this being situationally useful. Maybe even okay. Because it's like such high avoid, I'm rating it kind of high, like plus 30 avoid. It is cheaper than avoid plus 30. All of the abilities that grant you avoid through a weapon specifically are cheaper than avoid plus 30 and generally have better availability, but they're not as universal, so they don't always work. But I would say this is potentially good. It might be more like C tier, but I'll give this the benefit of the doubt, assuming that people run it on coverts and that they just do avoid stacking and just hit 0 incoming hit rates and just enemy phase with it. So you could run it on like Alchrist or something, or some kind of sniper. You could also just run it on any bow unit who's fast and reduce incoming hit rates substantially. All right, next we have bow focus. So this one, let me just find it. So this is on Lin, so plus 30 hits, this is the max, at the cost of dodge minus 10. This is good if you're just looking to fix hit rates. It's cheaper than hit plus 30. I would say this is like, okay, maybe situational should be here. And then this will just be bad. I think that's fair. All right, so this is just okay or this is, honestly, these are both kind of situational, but I kind of want to move it here. There's bows aren't even really, I'm going to do this. You could argue it's good, but they can't enemy phase very well, so what's the point? But these are, I would say, both situational. Increasing hit rate by 30. This is only really useful in units like Saphir who have bad hit rates, or units who are using bows who have bad hit rates. So like some kind of warrior that struggles to hit, like Etier or Saphir. These are common units people throw on warrior that use bows. Outside of that, though, it's whatever. And having plus 10 incoming crit is kind of suspect, though. I don't like that, especially if you're doing like an Iron Man run, so that's not ideal. If you're playing the game normally, it's just like you just have to use a pulse. But all right, next we have bravery. So this is one of the two modes. You have bravery and gentility, so I'll just do these both at the same time. All right, so I have the bravery base and the gentility plus. So all right, so the way it works is when you have Erica deployed, if you switch between night and day, depending on which mode you're on, if you're on Erica mode, you get gentility and lunar brace. If you're on Ephraim mode, you get solar brace and bravery. So if you just don't change modes at all, you will never have bravery, but essentially you get plus 5 damage, right? So if you unlock gentility plus, you essentially also unlock bravery plus. These, I would say, are strong. I don't know that they're metagame, they're just really good. Gentility is minus 5 damage from all sources. So if you're getting doubled, that's minus 10 damage. Or if you're just on a unit who's tanky and you want to increase tanking, that's just minus 5 more damage, which adds up over time. And bravery gives you plus 5 damage when Ephraim is activated. So plus 5 damage, and this is at all times, during enemy phase, player phase, whatever. So you get plus 5 damage at all times, or minus 5 damage. Both are really strong. Arguably, there is an argument to make that bravery is S tier, because getting plus 5 damage at all times isn't bad, but it is expensive to get this. So it's debatable. Like Lunar Brace is 3k, and then I think Lunar Brace Plus is 5k. So for 5k, you could just get plus 5 magic, which is like if, let's say you're boosting a mage, or for 5k you get plus 5 strength, or for 6k you get plus 6 strength. So it's kind of like the same thing, but it's like if you're using mixed combat styles, which is unlikely, that could be situationally good. However, this one thing this does enable is like fists. So if you want to do like quad fists, plus 5 damage is pretty legit, because that's plus 5 damage per punch. So maybe this is S tier, maybe this is metagame. It affects every source. I think the mitigation is good, but I think the damage is better. But on average, this is probably going to be active. So you have Lunar Brace. All right, next we have Break Defenses from Ike. So Break Defenses, if you hit a dude and break them, you have another attack for 50% damage. I would say this is just good, or it's like strong. You can get it on a few early units. It's only 2k SP. So with the Well, you can get, a few thousand SP before you lose Marth. So you could unlock this, and it would be decent. on certain unit types, and then on late game it can be pretty strong depending on how much flexibility a unit has. It's especially good if you have a character who has multiple like weapons. So if you have like a lance axe unit and then you run Marth, you also now have access to swords, so you have like the weapon triangle, so you could target breaking. So in that situation you could have, you know, some pretty huge advantage. It's definitely not the best thing to unlock, but it is really good, and there are some builds that are enabled by this to some degree. Maybe I'll put it down to good because it's so situational and its availability is questionable. Build +5 from Leaf. It's kind of cheap. Generally, you get build +4, and then getting build +5 requires paralog and mid-game. I would say it's okay. It's definitely not good because there's something better, which we'll get to. I'll just address that immediately. But it can fix some units who have low builds so that they can double more consistently. And it's only specifically good when the build difference is 5 or greater, because if it's less than 5, having build +5 is just redundant. So for example, if the unit only needs 3 build before the weapon stops slowing them down, then getting build +5 is just a waste of SP and bond fragments. All right, now here's the better one. Speed +5. It does the exact same thing, but if you use lighter weapons, you now just have more avoid and speed. So it's build +5, but better. Now, it is more expensive in terms of bond fragments to get because it's further in to Lynn's unlock tree. It's like level 18, whereas build +5, I think, is like 13. So you can get build +5 earlier, but generally speed +5 is just better. And a lot of the best units in the game have enough build that build +5 doesn't help them, and speed +5 helps them more. This, I would say, is in the metagame for sure. This is an exceptional skill. It pushes so many units into doubling ranges and enables so many builds that to say, honestly, it's better than these for sure. I'd say this is like high S tier. It's really good. Canter and Canter Plus, I would say, is in the metagame. It's really good for repositioning. It's standard on your Dancer. Like, there's no reason not to run Canter Plus on Sadal. It just gives him more flexibility and more mobility. So if he moves forward 5 and then dances, he can move forward 3 more or 2 more on base Canter. But you get him Canter Plus and then Quality Time Plus, and you're looking at adjacent heal of 10 every time he dances, plus 10% area range 2 heal. So he has 2 healing sources, then he has Canter for repositioning, and he's just absolutely cracked. And he's not a liability at all. He has enough speed to tank. But on top of other units, like if you're just running this for dive build, you can easily double things and one round them and then get out with Canter Plus. It's very powerful. It's really good on a more mobile team comp or just on a few units for increasing mobility. I would say it's in the metagame. Defense +5. I would say this is good. It's cheap. It's surprisingly cheap. It's cheaper than like other things. But if you're on like a tank and you're getting doubled, like if you're on a general, getting defense +5 could be good because it's -10 damage if you're getting doubled. Now, you can hit thresholds where enemies can't damage you, which is always a problem with general. You could also run this on other units who you're just making bruisers, who you just want to increase the durability of. But generally, this is just like something you could run situationally. Demolish, I would say, is just bad. There's no reason for this. There's not that many maps that you even break things. And the map they give it to you on, it's like a trap where if you open up the map with Demolish, it actually makes the map harder. Not that the map is hard. You can just use Bondage Shield and just kill all the enemies that attack you. But there's not that many maps with a bunch of junk on them. And it's just super situational. And there's no reason to use this over any of these other skills. There's just no reason. Dex +5, I would say, is just good. It's good for specific builds for trying to go for certain things. But in the current... Honestly, I'm going to put it in situational. It's like similar to build at this point. There's better things to get than Dex +5. So Divine Pulse Plus, I think, is actually... it's also situational. It is better passives. You know, you could just go for a more consistent thing like hit +30. It is cheap, but you have to waste a lot of bond fragments to get to it. To get to the high Byleth level, you also need Byleth Paralog done. Not that it's hard to do, but it's just like all these things factor in. So it's like availability is okay, but there's better passives. And if your unit has trouble hitting things, it's probably either a bad unit, it doesn't have the right engraving, it's using a bad build, or you know, something's going on that's a problem that's not being addressed with the unit or the build. Dodge +30, so this is essentially crit avoid +30. I would say this is bad. There's better ways of mitigating damage, and running crit avoid isn't going to help you much. It's not going to do anything. Like, it can nullify incoming crits, but you can just use Chain Guard. You could just kill the enemy at 2 range before it attacks you. You could use Bonded Shield. You could use like avoid tanks or physical tanks. Like, there's so many ways to deal with the problem that this tries to solve that is just useless. Draconic Hex. So this is, it's at least A tier. I don't know that I want to put it into S. I'll put it in a high A tier. I think it's almost an S tier. Now, the nice thing about Draconic Hex is it debuffs everything, including bosses, and it debuffs their defensive stats, their damage. It debuffs their speed, so it's easier to hit them. So it essentially reduces avoid. It reduces enemy stats. Like, it reduces all their stats, and it's pretty available. It's good on utility units or units that you want to just have to exist to just like Thoron poke or longbow poke, that they're not going to be killing things, but they can set up kills or debuff. So I would say it's really strong. It's definitely not the metagame in my opinion, because like if you just run the right builds, you can just demolish everything in front of you. So it is really good though, for sure. Like, it's not a bad skill, and it enables, you know, easy boss kills and can put bosses below. It can put their speed low enough that you can double them now, which is very useful. Dual Assist Plus, I would say, is A tier. If it worked on enemy phase, or if it had some other interactions, I would say it's S tier, but because it only works on player phase and the units have to be within range of the target, I don't think it's that good. Now, if you build around this, like if you make a team comp around this, you're essentially going to be throwing out other high impact passives that would enable a unit to 1 round consistently in exchange for random chain attack spam. So you're throwing out consistency for a different way of killing, but could similarly be effective. However, it's not as effective because then these units aren't as good enemy phasers. So now there is an argument to be made that this could be good on utility units who aren't going to be killing things. But if your carry unit's 1 round anyways, then it's like debatable how good this is. But it is strong, and there are builds that make use of it. So yeah, it's pretty solid. All right, now this skill, dual support. This might be a hot take, but I think this is metagame. I haven't made a team comp around this yet. I still need to get around to it. I'm doing like, you know, I'm playing like 3 to 4 games at once right now, and I still have other multiple playthroughs just in Engage I have to finish. But I want to do a dual support team. And essentially what it would do is, as long as the units have A rank support with each other, they scale each other's avoid rates. So if you had a square of units, like a Lucina user, and then 3 units with dual support, and they all have A rank support, which is easy to achieve early game and onward, you would scale their avoid rates, and you would have a box of unhittable units that could just fight things. So this works on enemy and player phase. So this would be really stupid. And also you'd have Lucina, so you could bonded shield like 2 of them, and then the third one could just be the highest avoid unit. So there's some potential here of just like straight up breaking the game on this, where you can just run a box of units or multiple boxes of units with A supports with each other. And it would require some positional play, but you could get your avoid rates up really high. Like you could get like plus 60 to 70, you know, just from 2 units being adjacent. So it'd be really stupid. And then you could also bonded shield and bring 2 other units along. So you could have a box and then 2 other units. You could have 6 units that are unhittable or unkillable or untouchable in a lot of ways, and just completely negate, you know, enemy attacks through avoid. So this seems to have a lot of potential. It needs tested, but in theory it should work. It already works on Lucina with A supports. So there should be, and there's also engravings that increase avoid in base game. There's like 2 to 3 that increase avoid by a lot. So you have access to that. So yeah, it'd be pretty wild in theory. It should work out. It should break the game in a way. It's avoid tanking. You know, the avoid tanking breaks the game. All right, favorite food. This one, I would say this is just good for Celica and like just getting it for free. I wouldn't actually run this. It just gives you, let me scroll down to it. It's like, yeah. When unit eats a packed lunch, its engaged meters maxed out. But there's only 1 lunch, and the only unit who can potentially have a second lunch is Bonet, who's not even that good, which we all know. I would say this is just bad. I wouldn't run this. Next is Headlong Rush. This is the definition of situational. You could run this. It's 200 SP. You could run this in like on certain maps where there's freeze spam, which there's like 2 or 3 of, but you can ignore the freeze spam and just dive them or just enemy phase them with bondage shield, because they'll freeze enemies tend to rush you, so they freeze you and then they start moving towards you. So as long as you just tank, you can just tank them and kill them that way. So, but it can be situationally useful. Healing light, I would say, is similar. It's nice to have. It's nice to get free HP when healing. So what it does is you get 50% of the HP you heal for back, and it's good to have for free, but I wouldn't unlock it personally. I don't think it's worth unlocking. I'm just like looking for it. Oh, is it on? Okay, it's under. Here we go. Where is it? Here we go. Healing light, Micaiah. Yeah, when unit heals with the staff, a unit also recovers 50%. You can unlock this. It's also for free on Micaiah at all times. I would just get it for free on Micaiah. It's not really that useful. There can be issues where you have to heal your healer, and that can be annoying, but if you're playing positioning well, you shouldn't need this, honestly. Hit plus 30, I would just say, is good. It does what you think it does. It gives you increased hits. It's situational, though. It's almost C tier. It's like, if a unit is good, they shouldn't need this, I find. Like, you can always just engrave their weapon or do something else. I'm honestly going to bump this down to C tier. I think this is situational. In all of my runs, I've never been in a situation where I'm like, oh my god, I need hit plus 30. Because you're throwing out a crazy passive, like speed plus 5, canter, power, or something better for hit increase, and that just doesn't seem worth it. It's only really useful in units with poor hit rates or units that are on axes that aren't engraved, generally. Holdout plus, this is definitely S tier. This is metagame. There are, like, you can Nosferatu tank with this. This is base game, not DLC. You can do, like, soul tanking with this if you want, if you're on Diamant. You can just use this for a general get-out-of-jail-free card, so that if something were to kill you or were to kill one of your tanks, it survives. Or even one of your units. Like, if any one of your units were to die and they have this on them, they just now don't die. You can get crit for 1,000 damage, and it puts you at 1 health anyways. Holdout plus plus plus. If you're 2 HP or more, you always survive. The other ranks, I think it's like 20% and then like 30%. You have to have like 30% or more, or 20% or more. Holdout plus 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 is kind of expensive. It's like a few thousand SP, but it's really solid, and it's a get out of jail free card. There are, I would prefer to have like more damage oriented or tank oriented things, like things that just prevent me from getting hit, like avoid increase or damage mitigation, but it's undeniable how good this thing is. And it can be run on certain crit builds where you keep your health low as a get out of jail free card in case something does hit you, so you can kind of play around that. Holy Stance plus plus. I would say it's situational, like high C tier. It's definitely not that good. Like, you might think it's kind of good, but it's seemingly not that good because in order for it to flip, so all right, so what it does, you take full damage, and then 50% of the damage you take is flipped on corrupted, which is only really useful in the endgame, which is useful, but you have to take damage, so you have to get hit, and you can only take so much damage, and generally things that are going to be tanking take less damage or take few damage, or low damage rather, so it's not going to be the most useful thing for flipping damage. It's going to flip chip damage at best, or it's going to flip big damage and then you have to heal afterwards. So either way, you're like spending resources to enable this damage when you could just do something like bondage shield or chain guard or an enemy phase tank unit build that can one round on counterattack with like vantage or something, or crits or durability, so that they take like 2 to 3 damage and then kill the thing on counterattack anyways. There's better ways to enemy phase. And in theory, this is interesting. I think in actual practice, there's just better options that outshine this. So HP plus 15, I would say is okay and situational. Increasing durability is generally good, but fixing speed is usually one of the best ways to increase durability, because if you're slow enough to get doubled, you're taking double damage, and if you improve speed so that you don't get doubled, you're halving the damage you're taking, which is better than a slight increase in health. It's only really useful in units who get one shot. I like, sometimes I'll put it on Hortensia because she has very low HP, but you can just keep her out of danger and just, you know, have her not get hit. So I would say it's super situational. Knife, so knife mastery. Let's figure this one out. Want to say, or no, is it knife precision? I don't know the name off the top of my head. I know what it does though. It's a leaf, right? Yeah, leaf. Yeah, knife precision. Okay. Grants hit avoid plus 15 when using a knife. I would say this is good or strong. I'll put it in low end of A tier, so like strong. Hit and avoid on a thief is good. A lot of people argue thieves don't scale well in the end game. I kind of agree with that. I feel like they suffer in the end game, which is when you need it the most. Like you need their avoid tanking the most. And, you know, there's tons of like enemy Thorons just hanging around that just hit right through that avoid. You know, there's enemy Sage Thoron users that just don't care about your avoid tiles and just hit the thief directly for huge damage. So like, I'm not so sure that thieves are like the best endgame enemy or endgame unit, sorry. But hit avoid is decent on them. It might, honestly, I'll bump down to B tier because I don't think thieves are that good endgame. From my own personal experience and from what other people have mentioned, I don't think they're the best endgame units. Lance agility, Erica, avoid plus 30 at the cost of crit minus 10 when using a lance. This one's interesting because if you ran this with avoid plus 30 and an avoid engraving on a fast unit, you're unhittable. I'm going to put this in S tier. Like, even if you don't double... Well, here's the thing, though. If I'm on, like, Griffin Knight... Well, I guess my damage is... Alright, so if I'm on Wyvern Knight, my speed is still high. If I'm avoid plus 30 with Lance Agility and an engraving that increases avoid, I should be borderline unhittable at base. And if I have, like, an A support that gives me, like, 10 or 20 avoid, I should be very hard to hit. And if I have 2 units running this, you have, like, 2 units that are, like, virtually unhittable. This is, like, an alternate... Even if you're just using this... Like, let's say you just have a unit who has, like, 80 avoid, which is, like, your average Chloe or your average Wyvern has, like, 80 to 90 avoid endgame maps. So, like, chapter, I don't know, 22 and onward. So if you're at, like, 80 to 90 avoid, getting plus 30 more avoid is 120 avoid, roughly. And then if you get plus 30 from, like, a Lucina engraving or something, you're looking at, like, 150 avoid just from existing. And that's pretty stupid. You're basically unhittable. So that could be very strong. And then you could also run like Lance Power and then also use like an emblem like Lucina. So now you have power, you have insane speed, you have really high avoid, and you can just fly around and just kill everything and nothing can do anything about it. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty broken. Lance Power, I would say is better than Axe Power because it has better... it does have worse availability. You can get like Lance Power 2 and 3 before you lose Sigurd, then you get Sigurd back chapter 17. So it's not like the worst availability, like you just lose it for mid-game chapters, which are arguably easy. But it is better in terms of what weapons it can enable. It can enable Javelin, it can enable Brave Lance, it can enable like Silver Lance, the DLC Lance, the Well Lance, Steel Lance. It can enable a lot of things. Javelin is arguably better than Hand Axe, because of the weight. Very few units can double on Hand Axe. A lot of units can double on Javelin very easily with less speed fixing and less attention. So I would say Lance Power is better. Lances are also like, you know, more accurate than axes. So you factor in the accuracy, you're usually better off going with Lance Power, and the weight. The accuracy and the weight is what hurts axes the most. So even though they have the highest might, their weight always, you know, it's like a meme. Like swords and lances always double and axes situationally double. So, like, even though they hit harder, they're just so heavy, it almost never matters. All right, Lost and Found. This is bad. You should not run this. Now, you can use this if you want to... All right, so what does it do? So, I believe trigger percent equals luck. This is going off of memory. When you stand next to an ally, you have a percent chance to find an item which increases support level, which can eventually lead to support conversations. Now, this is good for grinding out supports, but now that the activities in the Somniel are a thing, you can rapidly hit support levels easily, and there's no need for this. And you also get it for free with Byleth. All right, Luck plus 12. This is on Byleth. This is also quite expensive. I think it's a few thousand SP, like 3 to 4K. So I'm just like ballparking it. This is okay situational. It's only really good on like Anna or anything that's like luck-based to like increase her rate at triggering gold. But honestly, you're better off just using Anna as a combat unit and giving her damage abilities. And then if you get 500 gold randomly, great. But honestly, that's the best way to use Anna. Because she's a hard carry with great supports and a lot of potential. And I would say she's like similar to Pandreo in terms of like relative power in general. So, but she has way better supports than him, which matters for certain builds. All right, next we have Eclipse Brace. Or is that right? I'm sorry, Lunar Brace. Eclipse Brace is the other thing. Lunar Brace, everyone's favorite armor penetration player phase tool. Honestly, I think this is in metagame. It's player phase, but it enables brave weapons, it enables fists for quadding, You can even just situationally run this on Fram, who could be like a bonded shield unit, and then giving her a flashing fist plus 4 to 5, and she can one round things just with Lunar Brace 1. It's pretty crazy. It also just scales damage in a huge way for player phase nuking, and is good in general. I would say it's low S tier though, because it can't enemy phase, but it is really strong, and it can push a lot of units into one rounding thresholds. It also allows you to penetrate armor. So you can just go up to enemy armored units and just get tons of armor ignoring damage off of their high defense stat. And especially if you combine it with things like Armor Slayer, you're guaranteeing a kill even with like an Armor Slayer plus 0. So it's pretty good for player phasing. It's pretty good damage. There's a lot of builds that leverage it, and it's pretty solid. Next we have Magic plus 5. I would say this is strong. I would say it's like here. It's an increase to magic damage, which includes Levin Sword and all the magical weapons. It's like it's one of the few ways you can get tome damage increase. It is 5k SP, and it's on an emblem that requires you to be in chapter 21, because it's post chapter 20, you get Celica back. So not the best availability, but you can get like magic plus 2 to 3 early on with Welling. And really the only units you could put that on would be like Anna and maybe Saline. Those are typically the mages who would be leveraging this. It's really just good for tomes, but it is useful. You could argue it's B tier. It's definitely not like as good as the power abilities, which give you plus 10 damage per hit, but it is pretty solid, and it's worth mentioning. All right. Mentorship, I would say, is bad. It increases the rate at which you level up, and on average, there's better passives. You can run this on certain units like your Dancer just to level them up faster, but there's no need for this at all, and you're better off just running another passive. Momentum and Momentum Plus. I would say Momentum is okay. It's like low C tier. It's a damage increase, but the fact that you have to move in order for it to trigger isn't that good. Now, before the Well, this would be, I would say, like a B tier, maybe low A, because it's a good source of extra damage, and before the Well, it was hard to get these. But now that the Well is in the game, you can easily get Lance, Axe, and Sword Power 5. So it's completely changed the game. Next we have Pair Up, which is on Corrin, prevents damage from foes' chain attacks. This is like, I would say this is like B tier. I personally never have needed this, because you can just, if you set up your bonded shield correctly and you one round everything that attacks you, here's what happens. Let's say you're one tile away from all the enemy forces. An enemy backup walks up, attacks you, dies. You don't need this. If you enemy phase correctly in one round on counterattack with bonded shield, you literally don't need this at all. However, there are circumstances where this could be useful, but it's not like, honestly, I'm going to put this in situational. I think it's a definition of situational. It's not necessary at all, and with good positional play, or even just using like an obstruct tiles. So for example, if you want to prevent enemies from killing your bonded shield unit, you can have 2 of your staff utilities put obstruct tiles on either side of it, so only one enemy can hit them at a time. So this way enemies funnel in, and they're limited in how many things can hit them. And as long as you one round them, you can prevent them from surrounding you. So there's ways of getting around, chain attacks. You could also use fire. Just use fire. Fire slows down, lowers movement. Fewer things can get to you. That's a better way to do it. And you have Corrin. If you're running Pair Up, you have Corrin. You can just spam fire. So that's better. All right, next we have Perceptive. This one is interesting. If unit initiates combat, grants Avoid plus 30. This is Perceptive plus. Avoid increases with high speed. I believe that is every 4 points of speed gives 1 more Avoid. So this is a player phase Avoid increase. I would say this is like B tier, maybe high C, or maybe situational. I'll put it in B just to fill out B a little bit more, low B tier. This allows you to initiate and not get hit on counterattack. So if you're attacking like a worm or something, which, if you're using like dive units or like wyverns, worms tend to have like 50% hit rate on wyverns. If you run this, it would get their hit rate down to like 10, so it's less likely you get hit. So you just one round a worm, for example, or just attack certain enemies and reduce their hit rate on player phase and then canter out. But obviously, you're throwing out a lot of damage and speed for a build like that, so it's debatable as how good it is. But arguably, it's decent. There's some use cases. Maybe it is bad. I don't know. Maybe honestly, the more I think about it, it's like it is player phase. Is it like this just gives you avoid plus 30 all the times? Like this is so good. This is so good. This is like situational avoid plus 30. So maybe it's not as good. Quality time I think is in the metagame. It's free healing. It's, you know, you throw it on certain units, you throw it on utilities, you throw it on your dancer. Quality time plus is 10 health after waiting, and you can canter into a position to heal people. So Sadal, every turn, can heal people for 10, like whoever is adjacent to him, and then also anyone within 2 range of him gets healed for 10%. So just on Sadal, I would say this is metagame. On other units, this is nice. Like if you have a Corrin Sage and you have quality time plus on Sadal, you have 2 units who can quality time for 10 HP. This, if you quality time like 2 to 3 times in a row, that's the equivalent of using like a heal function, like a heal staff on someone. That's free healing. That's really nice. That's really good. It's like, I can only imagine if there's something like this for damage. That'd be so crazy. You just like wait and it does like 3 damage to adjacent foes or something. But it's free healing. It's pretty consistent. It's really good on utility units who aren't going to be like using combat anyways. And it always works. So what does it specifically do? After unit acts or waits, restore 10 HP. So pretty much any action or waiting restores 10 HP. And I'm pretty sure that includes core and fire spamming. So you can like fire spam and also it triggers. It might not though. It might not be considered an action, but definitely like attacks and staff use and all these things, it considers those. So, all right, next we have, I think, reposition. Yeah, reposition on Ike. Used to move an adjacent ally to the opposite side of unit. I would say this is situational. I'll put it in good for its utility, because I've seen people use stuff like this to do LTCs and to do hyper aggressive plays and stuff. So I understand how it can be good. It definitely is situational, but I think it is strong enough that it's decent. Now it's not something I would unlock though. I think it's something that you should just have from using Ike. Next we have res plus 5. It's not one of these ones where it's like I wouldn't want to actually use it. I feel like everything is just in C tier. It's situational. If you want to reduce damage on a tank or something, but there's better things. There's better things for reducing damage. But of the two, I would say reducing magic damage. It's only like really useful in generals, because most enemy mages are slow, so they don't double. So they hit once, whereas there are fast enemies that double, even like relatively fast units. Like there's enemy thieves with high speed, wolf knights, griffin knights. So of the two, this is generally more useful. This is super situational. Resolve plus, I'm going to put this in A tier. This is actually really good. If units HP is 75% or less after combat, grants defense/res plus 7 as long as units HP stays below 75%. So if your defense is at or below 75%, you will have defense and res plus 7. This is part of the reason why Ike units feel so tanky. Once they start taking damage, resolve triggers, now they're tanking even better, on top of Ike already giving you like 5 defense. So you're looking at a pretty solid tanking tool. Now, in terms of unlocking this and running this on units, it is debatable how good this is. It could go to B tier, to be honest. Because like gentility just always works, and it can also flip into this. So it's kind of a little bit better than resolve. I would say resolve is maybe B tier. Because gentility is -5 damage from all sources, keep in mind. Not just like that includes other things that deal damage, right? You have to consider that too. So you just take 5 less damage. So if there's an enemy engage ability that is like a multi-hit, that hits like, 7 times 10 damage. Now it's 7 times 5 damage. That's pretty useful, but it is situational. However, you can flip it into bravery for damage based on the Erica unit. So that is pretty crazy and pretty useful. So it's definitely stronger than resolve, which is good though. And I do think has a place in the metagame to some degree, but it's not as good as these abilities. All right, next we have a Resonance Plus on Celica. So Resonance Plus, unit is equipped with a tome. If your HP is 2 or more, you lose 1 HP at the start of combat and deal +3 damage. Now this is true damage, which is nice. So that's something there. And it's one of the few ways to increase tome damage In terms of SP cost, so Resonance Plus is 3k SP. Now, if you're just looking for a damage increase, Magic plus 3 is also 3k. You just don't lose health. So like the argument for running this is questionable. Now, for reducing your health for triggers or for some kind of Wrath build, maybe I'm going to put this in C tier. I think Magic is just better. It can scale more. Plus 5 damage is better than plus 3. If you're attacking something that's res is so high you need armor penetration, just hit it with physical. It doesn't make sense. I don't think it's very good. Silence Ward, I think is situational. There's certain maps where silence is a problem, but there's not that many, so you can run it if you want to. Next, we have the other side of Lunar Brace, Solar Brace. So Solar Brace, if unit initiates combat, unit receives 30% or 50%, depending on if it's Solar Brace or Solar Brace Plus, of damage dealt. So you have to initiate and you heal. Now, Lunar Brace is generally better because it enables you to kill. Solar Brace can be good because whatever damage you deal, you heal. So if you hit something for 30, get hit for 15, and then hit it for 30 again, you get your 15 back. So there is some use case there, and it's tied to Lunar Brace. So I'd say it's like here, like low A, maybe high B tier, because it's tied to this, and it's optionally, like you can optionally flip this so that you can heal now off of attacking, which could be, maybe it's more B tier, but yeah, this is definitely the better mode because this enables killing a lot of things. Speed Taker, easy S tier, one of the best abilities in the game. Plus 10 speed is so broken. Plus 10 speed is 20 avoid, so there's that. And it's usually enough speed to allow you to double even the fastest enemies. Between the two of them, I do kind of prefer Speed Taker. Now, you only really should have like 3 to maybe 6 hard carry, like 4 to 6 hard carry units that would even be killing a lot of things. So if you just have like 5 or 6 hard carries and 3 or 4 of them have Speed Taker, there will be enough enemies on the map for them to kill to max this out. And even if they don't max this out, getting like 3 kills, 4 kills is still plus 6 and plus 8 speed. And the speed lasts the entire map. And most endgame maps have way too many enemies. So if you're not warp skipping, if you're warp skipping or you're just looking for speed thresholds, this is better. If you're playing the game normally or at an average pace or even at a slow pace, this is better. Because endgame maps are full of enemies, you will not run out of enemies to kill, and you'll easily hit plus 10 speed on multiple units. But plus 20 avoid and the speed fixing. It's also great in terms of bond fragments. You can get it, you just get bond level 5 on Lyn, you can get it for 2k SP. So you can get this thing on units quick and cheaply. Speed plus 5, I'm kind of torn between the two. I kind of feel like Speed Taker is better for sure, and you just have to deal with like the early turns of maybe not being fast enough to double certain things, but then once it gets going, it's better. Versus Speed plus 5, the availability on Speed plus 5, you have to do Lyn Paralog, you have to burn through a ton of bond fragments per unit to get to Speed plus 5. It's also more expensive in terms of SP, so it has poorer availability. It's still really solid though, but if you do fishing, the bond fragment thing is negligible. I can't stand fishing in this game. I just have no patience for it. So it just like, as soon as I see the thing bob like 2 or 3 times, I'm like, oh my God, I just leave. I just can't handle it. And then like I'll always get like some dumb fish that gives you like 10 fragments. So if you can stomach fishing, this is really solid. But in general, you can only get this on a few units because of the bond fragment cost is really the limiting factor. Whereas Speed Taker, you can run on like 5 units and you'll probably be fine. Staff Mastery. Let's talk about them staves. I know people love the... I was like overcorrected on that. It's like, it's staves. It's like, all right. All right. Staff Mastery 5 grants hit plus 30 when using a staff. Staves also heal for an additional 15 health. This is, I would say, is good. Like here. I'd say it's like B tier. Healing for more health. This gives you more bang for your buck on cheap staves. This allows you to full heal more things with, treats, with mend, with heal. So you don't have to use things like recover, which is very expensive and rare. So if you have dedicated staff units, which I think the metagame is 4 to 6 hard carry damage units. Some of them are tanks with like bonded shield or warp skipping or whatever. And then the rest of your units should be like dancer, utility, maybe like an archer or 2 just to shoot down flyers, whatever. And you could have like a dedicated staff utility like Hortensia. She can just run Micaiah, or you can just get Staff Mastery 5. I think think you get this for free, don't you, when you run Micaiah? I could be wrong about that. But getting Staff Mastery 5 is nice for doing things like Freeze and Trap. Fracture, if you want to run it. Fracture is not really that good, but Freeze is really solid. Freeze can completely fix a bad position in some cases, and it also works on a lot of bosses, so it's very powerful. So getting hit plus 30 on that, and also the extra healing is pretty good. I'd say it's like B tier, maybe even A tier. Honestly, if you're going to have a dedicated staff unit, I would say it's like low A tier. I think that's fair, because if you're having someone who's just constantly freezing and obstructing and healing and, you know, doing whatever, you can even silence too, so like it works on freeze and silence. Both of those are very good. There are some dangerous enemies in this game, like enemy Thoron users that can hit for like 40 to 50 damage, especially against low res units. So if you can silence that dude, that can solve a position. If you can freeze a dude, that can fix a position. So there's a lot of utility staves that can straight up fix a bad position, and increasing the hit rate and accuracy on those is huge, as well as the extra healing. And if you have dedicated staff users, it totally makes sense to run this. Strength plus 6. I would say this is metagame, but it's like low-key metagame. This would be more used on dagger units, units like bow units, so like dagger and bow units. This is really their thing, to increase their damage, because they don't have a power. Now it's still plus 6 damage. It is 1k more SP than these, but it's still plus 6 damage, and if you're doubling or quadding, that's very substantial. So this could potentially make a unit like Alchrist able to one-round non-flyers on Brave Bow without Luna. So there's some potential there. Now you'd probably run like this with Lunar Brace, and you're looking at a pretty silly build. He might need speed fixing though. So like most units need Speed Taker or Speed plus 5 plus damage to consistently one round. There are other builds, obviously. There's crit builds. In base game though, crit build availability, you can only run like 1 or 2 of those. So you're going to need a mixture of like crit builds or trigger builds or just raw stat builds. I prefer raw stat builds because they're the most consistent. Other people rely on things like Panette crit more. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Panette crit. I feel like its mid-game availability isn't there. Like you have to get Roy first, so it's like chapter 20 and onward. And by that point in time, I feel like I think it's basically just like Bonded Shield, but worse, essentially, because like Panette is slow, so like she can't enemy phase as well, like without this weird specific build. So like if you're just using her in a different use case, I just don't like it. I'd rather just have something that's simple and more flexible, because needless complication is the death of plans. Like if you want to plan, it should be simple and clear and good. If you have a very complicated plan, there's more points of failure. All right. So, for example, Thoron can kind of throw a wrench in the works on a Panette Vantage build, you know? So that's why Holdout is run. So if like 2 Thoron, like if Thoron hits you, you tank it with Holdout. But if 2 Thorons hit you, you're dead. So, yeah, not a fan of that. All right. Let's just do Sword Power now, because I've been putting it off. It's been down here. Sword Power is S tier. It's in the metagame. Levin Sword, Steel Sword, literally any sword. Steel Sword, Silver Sword, Levin Sword, DLC Sword, the Fire or the Hero Sword. It enables a lot. It's really good. Like Levin Sword build on this thing is crazy. Levin Sword is already very strong, and in some situations it can't one round. This pushes it over the edge, so it basically guarantees that it one rounds anything you attack, including other mages in a lot of situations. Enemy mages tend to have low HP, so dealing plus 20 damage to them, because it's plus 10 damage, is massive. You could also use this, so like let's say you're a mage knight. You could run a steel sword and smack a mage, and now you're targeting their defense, which boosts its damage, and you're now getting plus 10 damage. So like this is really good on every sword unit, and I would say it's better than axes, but worse than lances. This one I would move here. Let's like adjust some of these positions. I think this is like the rank order. Okay. All right, next we have Sword Agility. It's another one of those avoid situations. This is also on Marth. It's cheaper. It has better. It's cheaper than Avoid plus 30, but it's less flexible. I would say this has potential. I would say it's like mid A tier, maybe like lower A tier, because you get Marth back so late. That's really what's holding it back. With Lance Agility, Erica has pretty good availability, so you could run this, and a lot of good units run lances, so this is better availability. Otherwise, I'd put this in S. Next is sword focus. This one's weird. I think it's like hit plus 30 at the cost of like crit minus or incoming dodge. It reduces, yeah, crit hit plus 30 and dodge minus 10 when using a sword. Very few units on sword have hit rate issues. I'm going to say this is just bad. This is just really bad. The reason it's bad is swords already have high hit. So if you're using a unit on a sword, they already have high hit. If they have hit issues, there's always engravings. If you're using a unit who needs both of those things, use a different unit. So like swords shouldn't need hit increase. It's just completely pointless. It doesn't help you. There's no swords who have such poor hit rates that need this. If there was like an axe focus, that would make sense because axes. I'm gonna actually check for that. Yeah, there's no axe focus. I'm on the wiki right now, so I can check these things. But yeah, axes need a focus. Swords do not. It's completely redundant. You're going to be hitting with swords for the most part. Very rarely are enemies going to avoid sword units in terms of hit rates. All right, tome precision grants hit avoid plus 15 when using a tome on Celica. I would say this is like B tier, like high B tier. I could see this being used on Pandreo for some kind of like cheeky avoid build. You get enough enemies and allies near him, and you get him this and maybe avoid plus 30, and you're looking at like crazy avoid rates. And maybe an avoid engraving, you now have like an unhittable Pandreo. I could see that being like A tier, S tier. Honestly, I'll put it in low A. I could see that being like a thing. Improving hit rates on tomes. Certain units need this. Maybe like Ivy, but you're better off with an engraving. Typically, I put Lucina engraving on Ivy's tome if I run her. Otherwise, I give it to someone else. All right, next we have holdout. So holdout, or I'm sorry, that's not holdout. The unyielding. They're very similar. They kind of play off each other in a way. So unyielding is a Marth skill. It's cheap. Unyielding plus plus at the start of player phase. If your HP is 40% or less, restores 40% of your max HP. I would say this is like low end of good. Well, yeah, I want to put everything into situational because this just feels like it's situational, but I'll put it in low end of good just to add some diversity into the mix. Yeah, it's not, the healing is nice, but if you're using builds correctly, I feel like this is just not needed at all. Like if you have the right units on the right builds, you shouldn't really be taking damage in most situations. And the only time that's true, like you shouldn't be getting that low that often that this is always useful. Because if you're killing enemies, like if you're one-rounding enemies or if you're tanking them or if you're using your builds correctly, you should be taking minimal damage and just killing things. So maybe this is situational. It does feel like it's situational. All right. Finally, the skill you've been waiting for, Vantage. Everyone's favorite leaf ability. So there's 3 tiers of this. There's base, there's plus, and there's plus plus. So if you're at 25, 50, or 75% HP or less, and foe initiates, a unit can counterattack before foe's first attack. This is part of the metagame, for sure. Put next to holdout, because it's... oh, wait, where's Wrath? Oh, did not load. So, all right, so I uploaded this. I created this tier list on this website, and I did download the Wrath icon. Like, I have it. I see it here. I'm going to make sure I'm not missing anything. I'm going to do this like the ghetto way. We'll do a snipping tool. we'll snip in Wrath. I just realized Wrath isn't here. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything else. Yeah, I can prove it. All right, so here's our little Wrath icon. So this website was like bugging out when I uploaded these, and it appears that Wrath didn't load in. All right, so here's Wrath. Wrath is an S tier. Put it like over here. I can't make this shorter for some reason. All right, Wrath is an S tier. I would put Wrath, Holdout, and Vantage all in the same place. They're all part of a build that's crazy, that's really good, that's been tested by a bunch of people, and it's really solid. All right, let's make sure I didn't miss anything else. I'm just looking through the list. Or we have Dodge, we have this. It seems like just Wrath didn't load. Lost and Found. Yeah, it looks like everything else loaded in except for Wrath. Yeah, even Resonance, Solar Brace, Staff Mastery. That's weird, yeah. Yeah, everything loaded in except for Wrath. All right, so here's where Wrath is. Because I know, here's like how the comments work. there will be one skill people disagree with, and there'll be like 10 comments on that, or it'll be like 10 comments. It's like, you forgot X skill. And, sometimes I do, that's unfortunate. Here, let's put a lull here. All right, lull. All right, so Wrath in between holdouts and Vantage, because it's a really good enemy phase skill. It enables crit builds. You use holdout as a safety net. Vantage enables you to counterattack. Personally, I think there's problems with this build for like hitting at 2 range, because if you just keep getting hit at 2 range and you're not on like Leaf to switch weapons, if you're on a crit axe, that's a 1 range weapon. So if a bunch of things just keep hitting you at 2 range, you will die. So I prefer Javelin enemies phasing, or like Tomahawk or something different, a 1 to 2 enemy phase, 1 to 2 range weapon. But it is a very powerful build, and it does have use cases that can completely wipe the floor with 1 range enemies. So if there's a bunch of 1 range enemies, it can just kill every last one of them. And there's also a build where you run Leaf and keep his bond level low and switch between a killer axe and a killer bow, so that you can crit at 1 to 2 range, and that's pretty good. So that's arguably S tier. Let's put an S there. Lulz. ST. All right, S tier. All right, so here's the list. This is based on my experience with Maddening on base game. This is not for DLC. It seems like most of the things are situational, and a lot of the metagame stuff is damage fixing, tanking, speed increase, avoid tanking, things that just like outright break the game. And then like the strong things, you have utility, damage, utility, shutdown, and stat debuff, and some damage, and so on. And then a lot of the situational stuff are things that you would run, every now and then, or for specific builds. That doesn't mean that they're bad necessarily. It just means they're more niche. So it's not necessarily like power levels so much as it is, this is always really strong, this is sometimes really strong, this is kind of good, and this is like super niche, and then these are just generally not even worth running at all. But these are clearly better than these, and so on. All right, so definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Feel free to drop a comment and let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.